christiangeekcentral.com. Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about the premiere, episodes 1 and 2 of Sweet Tooth on Netflix? Stick around and find out. I played a French horn solo of Somewhere Out There in elementary school. Anyway, hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com at Spirit Play Productions. This is my uncut review of Sweet Tooth. I watched the first 2 episodes of the premiere of this series on Netflix. The synopsis on IMDb reads, "A boy who is half human and half deer survives in a post-apocalyptic world with other hybrids." When I saw the trailer for this, I was like, this has a different feel to it than anything I've seen in a long time. I've got to see what this is. I don't know if it's going to be for me, but I've got to see what this thing is. As far as the story, the script, the pacing, the tone, it is, I would describe it as a post-apocalyptic and post-pandemic fairy tale drama. It feels intended for families with elementary-aged children, but it also has themes and drama, certainly for adults too. The world is not like a post-apocalyptic in the sense of Terminator or Fallout and stuff. It's definitely overgrown with vegetation again and wildlife, and I think that's intentional with some of the themes that they're playing with. I'll get to that a little bit later. So it's that kind of post-apocalyptic world as opposed to something that looks all ashen and gray. There's a sickness that's killed much of the global population, while all children being born at that time, as this disease took off, simultaneously, all of them were being born as like half animals. And usually of harmless or at least non-predatory types of animals like deer, pigs, and porcupines. I don't think I've seen a hybrid yet that involved a predator. Gus, nicknamed Sweet Tooth by one of the characters that meets him, was raised alone in the woods by his dad so that he could be protected from the population that remains, who are trying to survive. Survival is kind of like their biggest priority for many of them. And many of them blame the hybrid children for this lethal disease. And so there are sections of humanity, they even seem organized in some way, that are trying to hunt down and kill these hybrids wherever they find them. And they're reportedly mounting their heads even like deer. It's a blend of a serious tone, definitely has a serious tone to it, but with children's story elements. There's real danger. People die, but violence is not clearly shown. In the rating description, violence isn't even listed. Gus is also, he's a 10-year-old boy, a hybrid deer boy, and he is like this paragon of innocence with seemingly no character flaws. And that kind of thing is going to be much more common in a main character in a movie that's intended for children. He is pretty much completely innocent. I would say his only flaws are being naive or ignorant of how the world works. But as far as moral flaws, I don't think I could come up with a single one. So it reminds me of children's movies with main characters like Bambi or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I know those are actually both kind of deer-type creatures, aren't they? Fievel from An American Tail. That last comparison seems especially fitting, as Gus is similarly on a quest across country, traveling a long way to be reunited with a parent. And he comes across along the way a series of characters who, through their jadedness or their character flaws, show us the state of the world and what's wrong with it, and informs us how we ought to feel about these moral failings of the people around Gus. There are scenes that cut away for a while to other characters with separate stories that seem intended to eventually connect with Gus, and there are characters there that are meant to be sympathetic and virtuous and stuff. But this still definitely seems to be Gus's story, which makes it hard for me to watch because of the type of character he is. Purely virtuous, innocent, childlike characters work better for me in supporting roles, or in a comedy like Elf, where they're playing up that innocence for laughs. I don't know any purely virtuous children. We have two boys, aged 10 and 13, and they've had glowing things said about them and their behavior all their lives, but my wife and I know they are not without flaws. Characters without flaws stand out to me as often devices writers use to express their moral viewpoint, which makes it hard, if they're the main character, to not be distracted by that meta-narrative morality lesson that's intended for me to swallow. Along with that, I just don't like children's or stories where children are the main characters and they are always morally right, or they're often more wise beyond their years compared to the adults around them. And this show gives me some of that same feeling. The vibe, that kind of children's movie vibe, is not helped at all by an old man narrator that pops in now and then to remind us that Sweet Tooth is a very special boy, and this is his story. You know, just like, okay, Grandpa, can we, never mind, just go ahead and tell the story, Grandpa, and while I pull out a book or something. Now, I'm actually very interested in the world and finding out what happened to it, and the mysteries that are presented. I want to see revealed. You know, the supporting adult characters have strong and interesting motivations and moral dilemmas, a number of which I can identify with. But with so much focus on Gus, I don't know that I'm going to have the patience to keep going. Now, let me talk about the performances briefly. They're really all great. And as much as I'd like less of him in each episode, Christian Convery, I believe is how you pronounce his name, is very strong in the title role of Gus, or Sweet Tooth. He's not being asked to do Dakota Fanning levels of like emotional access in the first two episodes at least, but it would be really easy for a child actor in his position to come across as artificially and annoyingly sweet in this kind of role. Whereas, to me, he has the right amount of subtlety that helps me care about him a little bit, which I did by the end of the second episode, even though he's still getting more screen time than I want his character to have. As far as the stunts and visuals, I mean, it's not really an action-y, stunty kind of thing, but the production quality, I think, is great and has more of the premium quality that I've often seen in Netflix than recent Netflix shows like Jupiter's Legacy or The Irregulars, which just kind of seem to not have the production values that I really wanted them to have. This one still isn't maybe top tier, but many shots have a great cinematic quality to them, and the opening scene showing the world going to crap clearly had money and effort given to that. Okay, so as far as themes in Sweet Tooth, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on here that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? It's so crazy, you know, I just reviewed the video game Biomutant earlier this week, and here we have another post-apocalyptic, yet kind of overgrown, you know, nature has retaken the world kind of post-apocalypse, with an animal person in the lead, as the lead character, with an old man narrator and a storybook vibe, as well as being a cautionary tale with environmental themes. Like, this is really weird. This is really weird. Anyway, in this show, you know, I'll talk about the environmental theme. That's kind of, I would say, that the main theme that I think is most likely to trigger some thought or conversation. In this show, I was just kind of taking note that people who are meant to be sympathized with have in some way rediscovered love of plants and animals or living in nature in the wake of this pandemic. They're the good characters, are the ones that are in some way harmonious or valuing nature. And those who litter and who hunt are bad, and hunting is bad. We're meant to be kind of horrified at that. We're meant to be horrified along with Gus when he sees the heads of deer mounted on walls, you know. And yes, we can understand that, like, of course he's going to feel that way, you know. But I think that Gus is made a hybrid deer with a purpose, that we're meant to feel sympathy. We're meant to be reminded of the innocence of deers. We're meant to care about Gus. And so wrapped up in all that, I think we're meant to feel what he feels when he looks at the deer on the walls and say, oh yes, that's a bad thing, you know, as opposed to, you know, those who hunt deer and use the meat to feed their families, which is still a thing. People do that. Anyway, Gus's dad, who we're definitely meant to like, blames the pandemic on how people took from the earth, I believe he says, without giving back to it, is the sentiment there. And so he says, so Mother Nature basically fought back by creating this sickness. So it was because of our moral failings as caretakers or in our relationship with the earth that Mother Nature, the highest power referenced in this story, fought back by creating this sickness. And it's funny, how I think that we're meant to feel like that's appropriate and acceptable, and yet when people in the Old Testament are said to have done these horrible, horrific things to each other, I've known atheist speakers to kind of get on a high horse and say, well, God was just being vindictive and selfish and evil and stuff for letting out his wrath and and exterminating people and people groups and stuff like that. So it's just interesting to kind of take note of that. Now, whereas Biomutant has naturalistic or atheistic views mixed in with its environmentalism, Sweet Tooth gives me the impression that its author believes in some form of pantheism, where the physical universe, or Earth and nature in this case, are God himself, or a manifestation of God, as opposed to God being immaterial and separate and having made creation out of nothing. Under the pantheistic worldview, God is synonymous with creation. Or in this case, God, quote unquote, is replaced by Mother Nature. Nature is presented as a moral agent, even, who is right to take moral actions against humanity when humanity does wrong in this story. I think we're meant to feel that way. That's only one character that says that, but it's a character we are meant to like, we are meant to love, we're meant to care about. And so that's what makes me wonder, is that some worldview kind of leaking out intentionally or not from the author's fingertips as they're typing up the script. Nature is presented as a moral agent and a sort of being that we owe moral duties to, such as being good stewards of the earth and its creatures. Now, as Christians, there are parts of this message of stewardship and caring for nature, being responsible with nature and the world, that we can get behind, since we were originally meant to be rulers and caretakers over creation, and one day we will be in perfect harmony with nature as we rule it alongside Christ. That is what is planned for those who put their faith in Jesus and his rescue plan for us. And we can and should actually begin to enter into those attitudes of stewardship over creation now. However, as Christians, I notice in myself and in others, we often recoil at these environmental values being emphasized to the point of taking priority over other moral duties that God has revealed in his word are of more immediate importance, such as humbly loving and serving God, being under his instruction so we can understand more and more what our actual purpose is, what we are meant to be engaging with in this world. So humbly loving and serving God and loving and caring for the people around us. So when we see these kinds of messages being prioritized while just giving not even lip service to some of those other kinds of values that we would say from a scriptural standpoint are much more important. That can cause us to kind of recoil a bit. We can feel even more frustrated when disproportionate prioritization of environmental concerns also, as it seems to in this case, comes packaged with a worldview that replaces God with either a literal or possibly in this case, I don't know the intention, metaphorical being like Mother Nature. So I think there's a tension that's appropriate for us to feel here. I don't think we're meant to prioritize environmentalism in the way that naturalistic, atheistic, or pantheistic environmentalists would. We're not meant to, lean in that direction, but neither are we to be uncaring and unsympathetic toward the animals in the world. I think it's worth observing that in the sacrificial system of the Old Testament, it's not that people that made these sacrifices to God did not care about the animals. In fact, if memory serves, the sacrificial lamb for each family was to be cared for and kind of doted on before it was sacrificed. I mean, if they didn't care, if God didn't care about animals, and if people weren't meant to care about animals, then it wouldn't have been a sacrifice for sin to kill these animals in recognition, in sobering recognition of, oh my gosh, sin is actually a much bigger deal than we typically think of it. That seems to be a major part of why the sacrificial system was instituted, to help us understand the gravity of our sin when we tend to just treat it so lightly, and so we are, as Christians, meant to care about animals, and whether we're, we don't have the sacrificial system today, but I think even hunting them, I've known some Christian hunters who, you might think, well, they're killing animals, they don't care about animals, but in talking to them, they have a sobering respect for the animal and what they're doing, and there's the observation that's made that as they're hunting animals, a good hunter is hunting them in a way that's sparing them actually from starving to death, or from dying from a predator who is not going to be near as quick and clean in how he's killing them. They're almost certainly going to die in a much more painful or prolonged way, if not at the hands of a hunter. And so I've known certainly Christians who are hunters who have a very God-honoring view and nature-honoring view, to the degree that we're meant to, as they hunt. So but nevertheless, I think there is this appropriate tension for us to feel here as we're watching a movie or playing a game that has these strong environmental themes that are seemingly coming from a non-Christian perspective. But I don't think that it's a position that, when it's being expressed in entertainment, should get us in arms, get us up in arms. Or when people are expressing some strong environmental, passionate views, I don't think that we need to get up in arms when we're talking with them, or I don't think we need to vent on social media and make snarky comments when someone else puts an environmentalist thought out there. When chatting with people who have extreme devotion to environmentalism, I think it's wise for us to just kind of let go of any felt need to correct their thinking in that moment, and instead look for ways to invest in them relationally and see where they're at when it comes to Jesus. That's a far more important thing. If our hope for them is that they'll have a better understanding of who we are and what our relationship with nature is meant to be, they're only going to have a better understanding of that if they understand who made us, and what we were made for. So I think it should be a much higher priority to build equity in our conversations with people, so that maybe at some point we'll have an opportunity to connect with them on the much more important issue of where they're at with Jesus, or their relationship with Jesus, if they already have a connection with him. So and it's worth recognizing that we, even as Christians, can get caught up in over-prioritization of some particular virtues that we've just kind of made our pet virtues. So we can fall into an over-prioritization of the wrong virtues as well. So to my mind, environmental issues are not worth making any stink about as we interact with others who are passionate about them. All right, I have no idea what your tastes are in TV shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, skip this one, or maybe put it on like a second screen while you're doing something else, like playing a video game or something. By the end of the second episode, you found you did care some about Gus and what happens to him. And we're certainly interested in seeing where things go, what's going on in this world, and how they're going to resolve the problems that are presented. So it may be worth it to put on a second screen while you play video games and see if it makes the right changes to eventually draw your full attention to it at some point. But for now, it's not quite the experience you want it to be. Now, your boys might like it and might enjoy watching it with you, but you'd want to watch it with them to talk through any potential worldview preachiness that surfaces. And for now, you guys are already, you got a ton of animated DC stuff they're really excited to be watching with you. So, just stick to that. This one is rated TV 14 for language and fear, and those are all my thoughts for now on the Netflix premiere of Sweet Tooth. I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. For more information about the benefits of becoming an insider, you can go to patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you'll join us over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We've got a ton going on here at Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central, including our in-depth Bible study for geeks, movie, game, and other entertainment reviews or commentary, live streams, Christian geek news, original audio dramas, and tons more. And on top of all that, you can become a Spirit Blade insider with an influential voice and get access to exclusive content and rewards. It's your involvement as a patron that will keep all of this going and growing, so I want to thank you for your consideration in that. For more information, please check out our Patreon page through the link below at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Thanks for listening.